That's very good. Do you ever do that before?
I have the same.
Really? That's perfect. Because it's complicated sometimes.
Or a globalized world.
What's that?
Globalized world.
Well, I guess, right? Okay.
Globalized world.
So, I'll tell you what I thought to discuss with you guys from now for the next couple of months. It's right 2 months with the break essentially, right? You're here now for a week and then you're leaving and then you're coming back for 6 weeks. Right? That's 1 week. What's that? Where are you guys going in between?
No, we're not leaving.
You're not leaving?
Still here. No.
It's like we have like 5 days free.
Yeah. It's a yeshiva vacation.
Like you're some people going to Carmelese, like.
You have the country?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the Italians, we have two weddings.
2 weddings?
Yeah.
Where? In
No, here.
Here in Yeshiva?
No, here in
Israel.
Beautiful. That's
We've only just arrived in the yeshiva.
What's that?
We've only just arrived in the yeshiva.
I only work on the information I've been told. But anyway, so in the next few months, I'll tell you what I wanted to discuss. I got an email from Aristotle when I was in Boston, actually, a couple of hours from on last week. And is that where you're from? You're from Boston also? Yeah. Okay. So asked me to speak, and kind of asked him what do you want me to speak about. And he said, whatever you choose. And that's the worst thing. Like, tell me what to speak about. Bad enough to have to speak. So then I had a very long flight. About 5-6 hours to Amsterdam, and then 8 hours in Amsterdam, and then another 5 hours here. So I had a lot of time to think about what I wanted to speak about. And I'll tell you what I want to do. It's actually very apropos to what we were discussing before about Apple opening up, their outside of America headquarters here in Israel. So the title of I guess the series of discussions I want to have with you is called Icora. Okay, and I want to try to discuss and kind of see the sources into what Judaism has to say about ourselves, self. Okay, what does Judaism has to say about who I am, what I am? Okay, there's I don't know why that came to me, by the way, but it's interesting, I guess. And there's you guys ever hear of Abraham Heschel?
No.
Yeah, Abraham Heschel. He was who was Heschel?
I don't remember. Yeah, I just heard of him.
Okay, anyway, so he's an important thinker from the last century. Came from a Hasidic community in Europe, and then came over to America. He became the head of JTS, the Jewish Theological Seminar, the conservative yeshiva, and he was an important thinker. And in one of his the last interviews that he ever gave before he passed away, he said an important sentence, okay, which is that one of the main contributions that Judaism had to the world, okay, is the unique Jewish perspective on mankind. Okay, and the interviewer kind of was confused. What do you mean that Judaism has a unique view on what man is? And he said that Judaism revolutionized the way that we understand man, because Judaism introduced the notion of man is created b'tselem Elohim. Okay, the image of God, whatever that means. Okay, but that's a notion, that's a thought which is unique to Judaism. Okay, and that's something really important to think about. What does that mean that we're created in the image of God? Okay, what is this unique Jewish view on self? So that's really a discussion that I want to have with you guys over the next few weeks, and we're going to have to figure out how we're going to spread it out over a few weeks. But as kind of an introduction to that, or a springboard, and also because it's Chanukah, I want to start with discussing a couple of things. We're going to study, what's the schedule say? Today and on Thursday, right?
Yeah.
As far as
Wednesday or Wednesday.
Wednesday. Okay, that's great. Because Thursday you guys have this crazy teal. Okay, so Wednesday, same time? Wednesday morning?
Yeah.
Excellent, I'll be here.
Same time, same place.
Okay, same place, sounds good. Okay, so we're going to discuss a couple of themes regarding Chanukah, which is really connected to the bigger discussion that I want to have about, who are we, what's our self. Okay, so let me divide these out. There's a lot of material over here for kind of a longer class that I gave a few years ago, and my hard drive died last year. It's a very sad thing. There were clouds back then. Right, so I couldn't digitally back up anything, so I lost all my material. I had the hard copy over here, so I was able to reprint it. We're not going to be covering all this material. When you guys are bored or whatever it is, then you can read through. There's a whole bunch of Aristotle over here that you guys can sink your teeth into in your own free time. So I'm sure that's what you love to do in your free time, is to study and ponder Aristotle. That's what I love to do, obviously, right?
What's wrong with Aristotle?
What's that?
Yeah, what's wrong with Aristotle?
It's fascinating stuff. I wanted to explore the miracle of Chanukah and the story of Chanukah through understanding a dialogue between Judaism and Aristotle. Okay, we're actually going to act out that dialogue. Okay, I'm going to put on a monologue and I'm going to, play out the two roles. That's a joke. Okay, didn't get it.
Good one.
Thank you so much. That's why I chose rabbinic.
It's fine, on Wednesday we're doing interpretive dance.
Oh, really? That sounds fantastic. Interpretive dance. It's not during my class, right? Okay. Because there's an interesting, beyond or the, a kind of underlying the entire conflict and the entire story of Chanukah, we have to understand the worldviews also. Okay? What was Greece fighting about? And what were we fighting about? Okay? What was the conflict about? Okay? Any suggestions? Let's recap. Okay, I haven't studied about Chanukah in a year. So, what's the story? What's the conflict? What are the themes? What's going on with Chanukah?
Philosophy against religion.
Philosophy against religion. Okay, interesting.
Yeah, like Greek philosophy, like the not believing in God against the Jewish monotheism.
Interesting. Want to make your name one more time?
Huh?
Your name one more time? Elazar. Okay, so Elazar was saying that that the conflict of Greece versus Judaism, okay, or Greeks versus Israel back in several thousand years ago. When was it? Yeah, just over 2,000 years ago. Okay, was about philosophy, about heresy versus Jewish belief. That's interesting because many philosophers believed in God. Okay, we'll see that in a minute. Anyone else? Yeah.
It's like more.
Remember your name? Josh?
Josh, yeah.
Okay.
It's like faith versus like logic. Hellenism was all about like strict logic and logical conclusions, and God didn't fit into that.
Okay. What does faith mean? This is a discussion where we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. But faith contradicts or negates logic, and does logic not?
No, I don't think so, but they did.
The Greeks. Is it the Greeks?
The Greeks.
Okay, the Greeks felt
Faith is like logic and then a jump to God.
Okay, so in a few weeks we'll have a discussion about what faith is. But okay, that's an interesting point, Josh. Anyone else? What other themes?
Empires.
Empires. What do you mean?
They
What
wanted
do you mean?
Sammy.
The
The Greeks wanted a bigger empire. So then that's land, they'll take it. And anyone within it has to do what they do.
Okay, that's an interesting point. In other words, it was like a strict political struggle. Yeah, Greeks wanted more land, and Israel wanted to hold on to their sovereignty.
Soviet Russia.
That's an interesting point, by the way. The Rambam, by the way, okay, the Rambam suggests that the holiday of Chanukah, it's right at the beginning of Hilchot Chanukah. I think it's in Perek Gimel of Megillah and Chanukah. They go together, but I could be wrong. Maybe it's in Perek Aleph. Either way, but the Rambam suggests exactly what you're saying, Sam. Okay, is that the victory of Chanukah and the great holiday of Chanukah, okay, is a celebration that we restored sovereignty to the Jewish sovereignty to the land of Israel. Okay, which is an interesting point. But the Greeks, by the way, weren't necessarily interested in imposing their culture onto the cultures of the land which they claimed. Okay, the Greeks, which was a unique a unique philosophy of the Greeks were very pluralistic. When they would conquer a land, instead of imposing their beliefs, they would kind of integrate the cultures of the lands which they conquered into their own cultures. Okay, there's an interesting movie called, what's it called? With Jennifer Lopez. Not Jennifer Lopez. What's her name?
Jennifer Lopez.
No, Brad Pitt's wife.
Angelina Jolie.
I think it's called. Maybe it's called Alexander. Yeah. Anyway, you saw the movie?
Yeah, I saw it.
I know that.
Yeah, you know what I'm
Alexander,
talking
yeah.
about? Alexander, that's what it's called? It's with Angelina Jolie, right?
Well, I remember.
I don't remember.
Anyway, so I recommend that,
An old
gearing
movie.
up to Chanukah this, holiday season, go check out Alexander. Okay, it's an older movie, but it's really, kind of a biography, a dramatized biography of Alexander the Great. Okay, and it's good insight into, Greek culture and stuff like that. So let's try to get into the sources a little bit and to focus our discussion because we're running a little bit out of time. Okay. Aristotle, in a lot of ways, can be considered, the father, the initiator of the entire of the philosophy of the Greek Empire. Okay. Obviously, there were others, but Aristotle is, he's like the Rabbi of Alexander the Great, so to speak. Right, the Rabbi as far as rabbis go, as far as philosophers go. So he really inspired Greek culture, the Greek philosophical culture. Okay, let's see a little bit what he says on a few different things regarding God, what we mentioned before, and to try to get a little bit more into the conflict, okay, between Greece and Israel, okay, and really what the celebration is, what the victory is. Okay, there's an important insight. Okay, there's an important insight into understanding Judaism in general and ourselves within Judaism. Okay, that's going to be our conclusion. Okay. So let's just see the first paragraph. We're obviously not going to be able to read everything because there's a lot over here, but let's try to let's read the first paragraph. Anyone want to volunteer? Where it says, "God, the unmoved mover." You guys remember the name of it? Mark.
God, the unmoved mover of metaphysics. For how will there be movement if there is no existing cause? Wood will surely not move itself, the carpenter's art must act on it. Nor will the menstrual blood nor the earth set themselves in motion, but the seeds must act on the earth and the semen on the menstrual blood. Since this is a possible account of the matter, and if it were not true, the world would have proceeded out of night, and all things together out of non-being. These difficulties may be taken as solved. There is, then, something which is always moved with an unceasing motion, which is moved in a circle, and this is plain not in theory, but in fact. Therefore the first heaven must be eternal. There is therefore also something which moves it, and since that which moves and is moved is intermediate, there is something which moves without being moved, being eternal, substance and actuality.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark. Can you explain what you just read?
Well, that's Aristotle's theory of the prime mover.
Okay, excellent.
That basically the universe couldn't have just appeared, that something must have caused it to come into action. Something must have created it, because nothing can happen without something causing it to happen. And therefore, because nothing can happen without something causing it to happen, there must be something which caused everything, which is always moving. Which is the prime mover.
Which is always moving, and is always causing movement.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so here we're getting to the definition of God according to Aristotle. Okay, it's what philosophers called, and I never studied philosophy, but it's what the philosophers called the unmoved mover. Okay, something which moves, causes motion. Okay, which causes all causes, which causes all processes and all phenomena in life. Okay, but that cause itself doesn't move; is unchanged. Okay, in other words, there has to be something, or let's go out the opposite. Like Mark said, everything in life moves. Okay, and everything that moves is moved because of a cause, and something caused that to become. Okay, a baby doesn't just appear out of thin air. Okay, but rather it's born through a certain process. Okay, things aren't sudden; they're caused to whatever happens. Okay, therefore there must be a primal cause. But where did that primal cause come from? Okay, it must be that he's an unmoved mover. Okay, meaning unchanging. Okay, and here's the beginning of understanding Aristotle as opposed to Judaism. Okay, and we're going to get to this discussion a little bit more in depth in a few weeks. But what Aristotle's arguing over here, okay, is that there must be an unmoved mover, meaning that God is unchanging. Okay, unchanging. Okay, and if God is unchanging, here's the part that's relevant to me. If God is unchanging, then that means that he has no relationship with, for example, me. Because I change. And if he would have any relationship with me, even knowing about me, okay, then that would mean that he's changing. Something about God would be changing. Okay, but that's impossible. That's illogical, as we said before. Okay, because God has to be unchanging, unmoving. Okay, totally static. Okay, and therefore any relationship with human life, with the world, implies change in God. Therefore, there's absolutely no connection, no relationship between God and the world, besides the fact that somehow he initiated this process of movement. Okay. Which is a discussion in the next paragraph, which is very long, we're not going to get into how exactly that worked and what argument it makes for it. But in the next paragraph, everyone got that, by the way? Okay? Now what Aristotle is arguing over here is that since God is eternal, since God is perfect, then there can't be any relationship between God who is perfect and anything which is imperfect. Okay? There's no relationship between God and us. Okay? And that's an important point. Okay? Because the very first message of Judaism is that there is a relationship between God and us. Okay? The significance, without getting into depth, but the significance of the Torah starting off the discussion, okay, or beginning with the discussion with the creation of the world, implies that Hashem has vested interest in us. Okay? That's the message of the creation of the world, is that there's a purpose, is that God has interest in us. Okay, that's an important point because over here there's a big conflict between Aristotle and the very first message, the very first principle of the Torah. Okay? Does God have vested interest in us or not? Okay? How exactly things pan out in creation? Where do we come from? As far as Unmoved, etc. This is a long discussion in the second piece. But he makes the following argument. Okay, I'm going to tell you guys outside, just so we can move on. Aristotle argues the following. Okay, it says that time is eternal. Okay, what does that mean? That what existed essentially, what existed before time? Right, time. Okay, what do I have 5 minutes ago? There was time, and 10 hours before that, there was also time. So time must have always existed. Okay, time is in perpetual motion since, going back eternally. Okay, there's no actual beginning point. Okay, because since time has a beginning and an end, every moment, every second has a beginning and an end. Okay, and before every beginning, right? Before every beginning, there's the end of another beginning, and so on and so forth. Right? It's an old song, right? Closing time. Yeah, every new beginning is how does it go? Every ending is the beginning of another ends. Anyway, okay. But that's what Aristotle is saying over here. Is that time is a unit, has a beginning, it has an end. What was before the beginning of time? Another unit of time, and so on and so forth. And the same thing goes with motion. Okay. In order to end the motion, there's an activity which ends that motion. Okay. So motion can essentially never end. Right? Because in order to end motion, you have to do some activity, some motion in order to end motion. So it's this continuous cycle, okay, which leads Aristotle to believe that existence as it is has been going back eternally. Okay, which again contradicts Judaism, because what does Judaism believe in? Beginning, creation. Okay. Let's see one more piece over here, okay, and then we'll try to summarize Aristotle, and we'll try to get into a little bit the story of Chanukah. Okay, in the few minutes that we have left. You guys see on the second page where it says logic, and metaphysics 3. Second page, it should be in order.
Yeah.
Yeah, anyone want to read this? It's a short paragraph.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you good? Well done. Okay, excellent. Okay, does anyone want to venture try it? Logic. According to Aristotle.
I'll read it.
Okay, whoever just said I'll do it, go for it.
Logic, metaphysics 3. It is impossible for the same thing at the same time to belong and not to belong to the same thing in the same respect. And whatever other distinctions we might add to meet dialectical objections, let them be added. This then is the most certain of all principles.
Okay. What?
It's confusing.
It's a little bit confusing, but it's a very simple. Do you understand what you read?
Not yet.
Okay, read it again.
Jesus.
Concentrate.
Have it at the same time.
Anyone get it, guys?
An object can't.
Khan, is
You
that
can
you're
put it as
speaking
exist
here?
and not exist at the same time.
To belong,
Exactly.
belong to the same thing in the same respect. What that means?
Something can't exist and not exist at the same time.
Okay.
What about quantum physics?
It can't exist. and
So, okay, fine. So here's, okay, this is,
There's
one second,
no
let's try to
answer,
stick on the point.
What?
So something cannot exist and not exist at the same time. It's simple logic. Either something exists or it doesn't
What's he
exist.
saying about the other distinctions?
Pardon me? Other distinctions. Something can't be tall and short at the same time. Something can't be black and white at the same time. Something can't be,
It can be.
you know, something can't be matter and energy at the same time. Okay? You have to distinguish very clearly between opposites. Okay? And one thing can't be two opposites in one. Either you're male or female. Okay?
I'm pretty sure matter is just trapped energy.
Pardon me?
Matter is just trapped energy.
It's, you know, a few thousand years after Aristotle, then, you know, science figured that out. Okay? So, why is this piece important? Okay, I want to get to the point. Okay, I want to get to the point over here and try to really introduce a different perspective or a deeper perspective to Chanukah. Okay?
Kennst du den Katzenvogel? Ist die Katze tot und gleichzeitig nicht tot?
Aristotle argues, like we mentioned before, okay, that there cannot be, logically, there cannot be any relationship between God and man, between perfection and imperfection. Okay? There cannot be any relationship between opposites. Okay? One thing cannot be its own opposite. Okay? In your cup, you either have, you know, water or you have fire. You can't have both. Okay? By the way, in Egypt, in the plagues, we had ice with fire. Okay, it's an interesting thought to contemplate this, you know, when we get to that question in a few weeks. Okay? There can't be any relationship between perfection and imperfection, between absolute and subjective. Okay? And at the end of the day, if God would know anything about me, that would make him imperfect, and that would make him not God. Okay? Judaism, contrary to that, believes first and foremost that God has invested interest in us, and He cares about us, and He thinks about us. Okay? And to a certain extent, He even needs something from us. And this, in some way, and this is a discussion we're going to have more in depth at a later time, but in some way, we were able to change something, okay, or to improve something about God. Okay? In some way. And we're not going to get into this in depth. Okay? Let's ask a simple question. Okay? The Gemara asks, why do we celebrate Chanukah? Why do we have the holiday of Chanukah? Okay? And the Gemara goes into a story. If you look on the last page, okay, there's a copy from the Gemara. Okay, I'm just going to read it outside. Okay, and we're going to end. Okay? My Chanukah. What is Chanukah? For what reason do we establish the holiday of Chanukah? The Tanu Rabbanan. Okay, we have this holiday. Okay, and we have Hallel and all these things. I'm skipping a few lines. Okay, to the fourth line, the first word on the fourth line. Okay, it's the first wide line. Okay, the Greeks entered into and conquered the sanctuary. Okay, the Heichal, the front section of the Beit HaMikdash. וכשגברה מלכות בית החשמונאי וניצחו, and when the Hashmonaim overcame them and conquered them, but we all know the story that they only found one small jug of oil, okay, that still remained pure.
With the seal of the...
With the seal of the high priest. Okay, there was only enough to light it for one day. Okay, but what happened? They lit with it. And what happened? It lit for 8 days. Okay? And then the year afterwards, they established this day as a great holiday because of the miracle that happened to us. Okay? The Marami Prague asks a very obvious question, which I think we can all think about ourselves. You know, who cares? And we're not going to read this inside because we don't have enough time, but I highly recommend if you guys are going to be tuning on Aristotle later, you guys should definitely take the opportunity to read through this piece. It's a little bit complicated, but I'll give you guys the general direction over here. The Mara asks the following question: who cares about the oil? Big deal. So live for 8 days. At the end of the day, if they didn't have enough oil, okay, halachically speaking, if they didn't have enough oil, then they would be exempt from the mitzvah. Okay, if you're not able to perform a mitzvah, then you're exempt from it. What can you do? Okay, we can only do what's within the realm of our capability. Okay, so what's the big miracle that this oil wait for 8 days? The Maharal therefore suggests that the oil is an indication to a higher message, and he gives two suggestions, both of which are very connected. It represents A, the victory over the Greeks. Okay, and it represents B, our ability to perform mitzvot in general. Okay, and you guys have to see it inside why, but the two are interconnected. Okay, this victory over the Greeks, okay, and our ability to perform mitzvot are interconnected. Okay, what's a mitzvah? What does it mean that we're performing a mitzvah?
Commandment.
It's a commandment. Okay, that's one way of looking at it. Okay, it's definitely a traditional way of looking at it.
We connect to God.
We connect to God. Interesting. Okay, in Hebrew, by the way, do you know what the word mitzvah comes from?
Come on.
From command, like tzivui. Okay. But you know what else? What other word? You guys ever hear the Hebrew word tzevet?
Team.
Team. Okay? When we perform a mitzvah, then we're expressing that we're performing some act of teamwork together with God. Okay? That we together with God are changing something about ourselves, we're changing something about the world. Okay? We're partnering with God in creation. Okay? There's something about us that we're adding to the world that God didn't. Okay? We're not only in a relationship with God, and here's the big war with Greece. Not only are we in a relationship with God, but we're advancing that ultimate God purpose. Okay? We're revealing more of God in the world. Okay? And that's a conflict. Ultimately, the conflict and the resolution and the victory of Chanukah, okay, is that the Greeks wanted the world to believe that there's no relationship between God and us. Okay? And our victory was an expression not only that we can light candles, but it's a victory that we're in a partnership with Hashem. Okay? And that Hashem has interest in us. And more than that, Hashem has interest that we're going to bring more godliness into the world. We're going to bring more light into the world. Okay? There's a partnership between us and man. Not only is there a relationship, not only is there vested interest. Okay? Not only does God know, okay, but there's this concept of a mitzvah. Okay? Which means that we're in a partnership. Okay? That God is going to be completed through us. By the way, I'll make one more point, and with this we're going to conclude. There are a few decrees that the Greeks initially posed against the Jewish people. Do you know what they were?
Brit Milah.
Brit Milah, excellent. There were three. Talmud Torah, learning Torah, and third,
Tefillah.
not Tefillah. Also not. No. Shabbat. Pardon me? I gave it away because you guys have to go. Okay? But you understand what Brit Milah means? Okay, we won't get into each one, but you understand what Brit Milah means? Okay, Brit Milah, right, obviously in the logical sense.
Connection to God.
Okay.
The path with God.
Covenant with God.
Pardon me? Covenant with God. Okay, it means that something about my actual body is godly. Okay, and that's the first and foremost things that the Greeks wanted to destroy. And that's the greatest celebration that we have. Okay, is the message that something about me is godly. That's all for today. Thanks, guys.